So we've done just a little bit of work on the session since last time. Basically, I'll pull Pro Tools up here in a second and show you. But essentially, all we've done is we have gotten the final tracks in. We had a vocal track that wasn't in, and then I also added markers into the Pro Tools session. We had markers in the Ableton session on our Rewire setup, but we didn't have markers in the Pro Tools session, so I got those set up as well. So now let's switch over here to the Pro Tools window, and we can see this is kind of what we are working with now. So I've got all these markers up here, which will allow me to set everything up, or allow me to skip between different areas. And then you can see here we have the final vocal. An interesting little issue that we had with this vocal, she did a clap like she was supposed to, but she was exactly, looks like 2 beats ahead of the click track. So I had to offset this by 2 beats. So that would be 1 beat off. Yeah, so I had to offset this by 2 beats to get her to line up, and even then still it's not perfect. Okay, so you might see me doing some work with this. Now, one of the things I wanted to show, I didn't get this set up, so we're going to do just a little bit of extra prep here to make this really easy. So I have my memory locations here, but I'm going to show you guys something that I really like to do when I'm dealing with a large session file. Okay, if you guys are watching live, be sure to comment and ask any questions or anything like that. But one of the things I like to do when I'm mixing with a large session folder is I like to kind of create my groups, but I also like to create memory locations for my groups. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select all of my tracks here that I don't need. And over here in this left window, I'm going to hold Option and Shift and then click to make those go away. Then I like to use another hotkey called Command Option Control and then the down arrow. And that is going to make resize all of my tracks to fit in this window. Now what I'm going to do is press the function return hotkey, and that brings up the new memory location dialog. And then what I am going to do is now create some groups. I'm going to make the number of this location 90. I don't want there to be any time properties, and I want this to show track visibility and track heights. Now I'm going to call this drums. Okay. Then what I'm going to do is now select all my drums, make those hidden, select my bass, select the track piano, acoustic guitar, mandolin, all of these instruments here that I need, and hold Option Shift. Option Shift in Pro Tools is just a apply to selected hotkey. So anything that is selected, it will apply the same function to all those. So I'm going to do the same thing, Command Option Control down arrow to make those resize to fit the track window. And now I'm going to create a new memory location, 91, and that is going to be instruments. No time properties, but track visibility and track heights. Press OK. Then what I'm going to do is now I'm going to select all of my vocal tracks, as well as the effects that are going to be used for the vocals. Use that same hotkey to resize. Okay, and then function enter. If you have the luxury of having a larger keyboard that has a like a 10 key off to the side, then you don't have to use the function return. You just hit the enter on the 10 key. side of your keyboard. I don't have one of those, so I have to use the function key. So now I'm going to do a vocals memory location, track visibility, and track heights. And then the last thing is we're going to now go in and select, we're going to add all of our tracks. Now, we had an issue where in this one, our keys in our synthesizer did not work. So those are not going to be added into the final tracks. So we're just going to be using the multi-tracks to supplement that. So now I have all of my tracks here, and then I'm going to make a new memory location once again. I'm going to make this one 99, and then this is going to be all tracks. No time selection, but it does track visibility and track heights. So I can create more groups. I have, from 92 all the way to 99, I can create more groups if I want to, but I certainly don't have to. What this allows me to do, as you can see, when I'm working on the drums, now I just have the drums visible. When I'm working on the instruments, now I just have the instruments visible. When I want to work on the vocals, I can have the vocals visible. And when I want to see everything, I can click this and see everything. So it's just something really, easy that I think is gonna, it makes it a little bit easier when you're working with a very large session like this, over 20 tracks. It kind of helps me keep things organized and helps me keep from getting distracted. As you'll see with a large number of tracks, if I want to work on the vocals, a lot of times I'll be working on the vocals and then I'll get distracted and be like, okay, now it's time to work on the electric guitars. And if I have this to where I just see the vocals, then I kind of it's a little easier for me to just work on the vocals. So, all right. Now we've got one last step of the prep that I wanted to show you guys. And this is going to keep the mixing for this session pretty streamlined and pretty, we're trying to minimize as much time as we can because I want to be as efficient as possible. So I'm going to be importing some session data, mainly on the instruments. I'm not going to import anything on the vocals, but here is the previous virtual band song that I mixed, Calvary's Shadow. And it's the same instruments, the same setup, so I'm very confident that a lot of my settings are going to be the same, and then I'll just fine-tune it. So here's the import session data window in Pro Tools. I do not want to import any of my main playlist options, but I'm going to choose the track data that I want to import, which is basically everything. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to assign these tracks, and I'm going to match them with tracks that are in my Pro Tools session. So I want my kick to go to kick, snare top. I want these to line up. Snare bus, I do have, so I want that to go in. And I'm just going to go through and literally click all these to make them come in. This is going to save the drum mixing and make it super easy. I will go over my drum signal chain and kind of how I'm processing the drums. Now, there's not a drum verb yet. Okay, so I'm going to just put that on a new track. Track drums, I don't think I was doing any processing on them. I don't want to, so we won't do anything there. Bass drum, or bass guitar, I do want to import that. We don't need keys and synth. Do I want to import this? Maybe, but not right now. Acoustic guitar, we will do that. I'm going to do the electric guitars a little bit differently because we have more of them, so I'm not going to import that session data. I will import this electric guitar delay because I know I'm probably going to use it. I did use a guitar bus, and I'm probably going to need one for this mix as well. Let's see, background vocal bus. Not going to do anything on that. Now, what I will do is I'm going to import the session data for my effects because I liked the effects that I had on the last one. And so now I can just fine tune them a little bit. I'm definitely going to need the distortion, and I'm not going to import my master bus because I'm probably going to process it differently for this song. So I've kind of imported all of the session data that I think I'm going to need for this. I don't need any of this stuff over here. So now I'm just going to press OK. And Pro Tools is going to do its thing. You can see there's this dialog box going on here. And we should, once all this stuff happens, have some session data in the actual mixing session. So this takes, as you can see, a little bit of time. Now, with this session data, okay, you can see it has actually kind of copied my mix over here, which is fine. I'm just going to reset that because I don't necessarily want the exact same drum mix. Okay, so I'm going to just reset all these. In fact, I know that we did this in the last thing, but I'm just going to go ahead and reset everything because I'm going to have to gain stage the new vocal anyways. So now we can see that some of our info has changed a little bit. So like the lead vocal has been pushed over, the guitar bus and electric guitar delay needs to be moved over. Drum verb needs to be brought over here with the drums. And everything else now looks to be pretty good. I do need to set all of these. Since I have a drum bus now, I need to set all these to output to the drum bus, or sorry, to the electric guitar bus, which is right here. I'm just holding Option Shift while doing that. And I'm going to actually call this E-guitar bus. So I'm just renaming this on another page here. So now you guys can see this is all renamed. Everything looks to be going pretty good. Yeah. So one last thing, because I don't know if sometimes this happens, sometimes it doesn't. Okay. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to select all of my tracks. Okay, and I'm going to Command A to select all. Or actually, I'm just going to click all tracks here. Then I'm going to go to Edit, Clear Special, All Automation. So now all automation is deleted. Just in case there was any automation that got pulled in from the session, I wanted to make sure all that's gone. All right. Final step, final last bit of prep. I've got a new lead vocal channel, so I need this lead vocal to be gain staged. So just gonna gain stage that real quick. Avid gain, analyze it, make this a little bit bigger. So it's at -1, so I need to go down to about -5. And there we go. Now it's gain staged. It's peaking at the same level as everything else. And then what we had done last time, the exact same thing. I am going to real quick put on SonarWorks Reference 4. So SonarWorks Reference 4 is a piece of software that I use. It's basically room EQ for my mixing studio, so it allows me to kind of not... it allows me to basically just be able to kind of hear a little bit better. I'm going to select my all tracks group now. Make sure that everything except for the buses and the reverbs and all that are in, which it looks to be. And then we are going to do the same thing. We're going to play a part of the song. I'm going to just pick a chorus here. And then we're going to pull the level down until it peaks at about -6. All right. And that is that. We are now done with prep. Awesome. So a couple hours into the prep work, and that's that. Now we're going to do another save as, and I'm going to call this Holy Water Mixing, because now we are moving on into the mixing stage. Congratulations, we've done it. So if you've been following the streams, you know that, I think our last stream was for a few hours, and we've been streaming now already for about 15 minutes. So the prep work really is just getting to where you can mix. It really is a big time consumer. So, all right. Now, let's talk a little bit about how I mix my channels. Okay. So we can see that I've got on almost every channel, there's a Slate Infinity EQ. Now, what this is doing here, like for the kick drum, I'm boosting some of these low ends, I'm cutting some of the mid, and I'm boosting right around this 5K area where the beater is. Then I also will have a Slate Virtual Mix Rack, which this is literally a Slate preset that I really like called Big Rock Kick. It boosts and cuts some really nice frequencies. It's got a little bit of compression going on, which we can see. A lot of bit of compression going on, but it gives it a really nice fat kick sound, which I like. For the snares, all I'm doing is on my snare top, I'm cutting some of these overtones, boosting some of the high end a little bit. And then I've got another Slate preset, Classic Snare 1, but I have adjusted the compressor settings a little bit. So I've adjusted the compressor settings a little bit. I love this Distressor plugin. Super awesome. Hi-hat, not a whole lot going on here. EQ is kind of, I'm cutting off a lot of the low end. I have a warm hi-hat preset on here that I felt was kind of nice. This is a big thing. I'm using the Eosis de-esser to soften the hi-hat. I'm using the overhead soften preset. So for the toms, I'm literally using, once again, another preset. The rack tom preset for these two, and then the floor tom preset for these two. How I've adjusted these is I am using a drum gate from Slate, and basically just kind of filtering out a lot of the stuff that I don't need from the drums. For the overheads, I'm using the overheads tight preset for this. I'm using the Eosis de-esser on the overhead soften preset. And then I'm using the Avid channel strip. This is something that I set up here. This is basically a ducker that has a key input for the snare sidechain. And so I've got my sidechain set up to be the source of the key input. And I've got the key set as the snare sidechain. And over on the snare, on my snare top, which I could actually move this to the snare bus, which I'm going to do, I have a send going to my snare sidechain. So what happens is when the snare hits, I'll just show this to you. When the snare hits, it's automatically pulling the overheads down. So I do that a lot. You can see I've got a kick sidechain, and the kick is sidechained to the bass. So whenever the kick hits, the bass gets pulled down. It's going to make the kick and the bass not compete for space as much. And then I'm moving my mic a little closer. So yeah, you'll see me use side chains quite a bit. Okay. So, and then I think I've got the only other place where I usually side chain is I'll have the lead vocal set up on a side chain, which you'll get to see me set up here in a second. Okay. So a lot of people, this is where mixing kind of becomes, this is where mixing sort of becomes a personal preference. I like to start with the drums, and especially with a song like this, I think the drums is really important. So that's where I'm going to start mixing from. And then we will go on to things like vocals and guitars. So I'm going to just go to my drums, and I'm going to activate my drums group, solo in on them, and now we're going to start mixing the drums. I'll talk through what I'm doing a little bit as I get to it. So one of the things I just realized, and this happens sometimes when you bring in new tracks, I want my drum verb in my memory location, so I'm going to update that. I just add the drum verb in, right click on my memory location, and now it's updated. So now if I go to instruments and drums, the drum verb is there, because I'm going to be editing this drum verb. This song has a very big sounding reverb, and so I want that to be coming through. Let's solo in on the drums again. Okay, so I'm just going to set up a loop on this chorus area. So all I'm doing here So what I'm doing here is I'm just adjusting this reverb to get like a nice big reverb sound. So. Cool. And I'm sending the whole drum bus to this reverb because I want it to sound like it's in this big arena type setting. Now, I'm liking the sound of the toms, liking the sound of the hi-hats and the overheads. I'm going to solo into them just to make sure, but the big thing that I'm not liking right now is the sound of this snare. So I'm going to solo into my snare drum. I'm going to find a better spot to loop. Maybe this chorus here. Thanks, Josh. Josh says, man, you're terrible at this. Find a day job. So what I'm doing here is I want this snare top to be a little bit fatter, and so I'm adding some of this 3.2 to get that snap of the of the stick, and then I'm adding some like really low 394 hertz to try and beef this thing up a little bit. All right, so now I'm gonna just play around with some compressor settings and see what I like really. I think the EQ is kind of where I like it. Yeah, so now I'm gonna play with this compressor just a little bit. So what I did there, messing with the compressor a little bit, I copied this preset or this over. Basically, I copied A over to B, and I'm gonna mess around and see, do I like the super squashed but with like some parallel compression going on, or do I like the do I like less compression overall? So now I'm kind of gain matching these to just see, you know, what I like. I'm going to listen to it in the context of the whole drum mix. So I think I'm liking the parallel compression a little bit more. It's given a little bit more of punch. It's given it a little bit of a longer release time. So I think I'm digging this parallel compression. That's something that is really important when you're mixing, is being able to A/B between things and just try to figure out what you like best. So I think the snare is sounding pretty good. Let's listen to it in the context of the whole drum mix. Yeah, so I think that sounds pretty good, with and without the drum verb. So a lot of this is just fine-tuning your settings and what you think, you know, you like. Like I said, I had a pretty good starting point using the Slate Digital presets and then also importing previous session data. So let's compare these drums to the track drum sound. That's one of the things I love to do, especially with mixing with the multi-tracks, is being able to A/B between the two and kind of use these as a reference. So let's kind of listen to both of them. Well, for some reason, oh, they're not soloed. So their snare is a little bit more punchy. I think this is because I am actually listening to the sampled drums. So I think what I want to do is mute these and then make the live drums come through so I can kind of see what that sounds like. So I actually like the sound of my drums better than the live drums. Now I do like the sampled drums better than the original, but since I don't have the ability to do sample replacement, this will be good enough. If I had the ability to do sample replacement, I would probably do some sample replacing on the snare or add in a third snare drum track that is a sample, but we don't have that ability, so I think for now this is the drum sound that we are going to go with. So pretty punchy, pretty decent sounding. Not by far not the best drum sound in the world, but it works for the context of this. So now we will start with the drums. We're going to start now going to some of the instruments. So the first thing I like to do after the drums is I like to add in the bass guitar. So let's hear how this sits in. And notice when I'm doing a lot of this, I've got just an area of the song in loop. I don't mix with listening to the whole song like I would when it's live. I'm picking and choosing kind of the areas that I want. So to get a starting point, I just usually pick a chorus and loop it. So let's hear what the bass is doing now. So I'm going to go to my all tracks view, solo into the drums, and then solo into the bass. So there's a little bit, I was in the previous song using this aggressive bass sound. I'm going to try this fat bass preset and see if it's any different. I like this a lot better. Yeah, so it gives me that little bit of the buzz of the bass, yeah, so I like that preset just a little bit better. Now let's listen to this with the synth bass. I'm going to make the synth bass be right at the center as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm copying my kick side chain over to the synth bass as well, so that that kick side chain is going to bring down the synth bass too. So see if you guys can tell the difference. I'm going to bring the synth bass in and out of solo and see if you can, hear a difference. I think the synth bass is adding a cool grit texture to the bass, and I'm really liking what it's doing. It's not a huge difference, but it's just a little bit of an extra texture. Keep in mind that these faders are pretty close to the same level, but they don't have to be. Okay, so it's not like I have to set those at the same level. It's just kind of how it's working out. All right, let's move on. We're going to add the acoustic guitar in and hear what this sounds like. So I'm going to be using the track acoustic guitar to help kind of beef this up. So I've got my regular acoustic, my actual recorded acoustic panned to 51. So I'm going to pan both sides of the track acoustic to 51 as well. And let's hear what this sounds like. I like the sound of this acoustic guitar, but this is where we can kind of get into something neat. I'm going to pan this back up the sensor real quick. Good and well knowing that I am about to bring this right back over to 51, but I'm going to do something really neat. I'm going to create a new send to a new track, which is going to be a stereo aux input for some chorus. All right. This acoustic guitar track coming from the multi-track versus this one, it's not as wide and not as spacey. So I am going to add just a little bit of chorus. Now, I'm going to over-exaggerate this. Anytime I'm adding an effect, I always over-exaggerate it, and then I'm going to bring it back. Okay. So I've got the acoustic guitar coming in. Now I'm adding the chorus send, and now I've just got to choose a chorus effect that I want. So I'm going to go modulation effect. Yeah, we'll just use the standard default Pro Tools, or actually this is by Kilohertz. This is a cool chorus plugin. So we're going to solo safe this. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this chorus, I'm going to press this FMP button that stands for follow main pan. I'm going to move this over to 51 on the stereo field. I'm going to pan that off 51 degrees. Yeah, chorus is sounding cool, but now I'm just going to bring it back a little bit. So without chorus, with. So it's just adding a little bit of width and a little bit of a kind of a three-dimensional aspect to that acoustic, which I think makes it blend a little bit nicely with this coming from the multi-track. So that's sounding cool. Now let's add the mandolin. So right now the mandolin is panned hard right and hard left. I want this to still be a stereo sound, but I want it to be not as wide. So I'm going to bring that up to like 24 and see how this sounds. Yeah, that sounds really cool. I'm going to just experiment here and copy this chorus send over to the mandolin. Yeah, that sounds pretty cool. I don't care what you say. Say what you want in the comments. I think that sounds pretty stinking cool. Let's hear what this mix is sounding like with the drums and the acoustic instruments all in. We're not so much working on the balance right now, as I'm just kind of doing this is like the pre-mixing stage of me sort of figuring out what I'm wanting to do. So let's hear what this sounds like. Yeah, sounding really good, coming along really nicely. There's still a lot of room to be filled up, which is the biggest thing when you're listening to your mix. Um, if you can feel like uh, if you can sort of perceive the sonic space around you, there's still space to be filled up. And if you're getting to this point in the mix where we've got drums, a bass, and then like three other instruments, and it already feels full, that's when you know you're going to have issues. But this mix is not coming along like that. It's coming together really nice. Josh says the layers do sound cool. Didn't think I liked it at first, but after hearing all three, it's got a cool sound to it. Um, that's another thing about mixing is you kind of have to have a big picture thought process. Um, and so, you just have to be able to kind of hear what the big picture is sounding like. Now let's start working on the electric guitars a little bit. So we've got 3 electric guitar tracks, 4 actually, if you count the one coming from the multi-track. Real quick, I need to update my all tracks group since I added that chorus. So I'm going to go over to instruments. All 3 of these electric guitar parts are playing at the same time. So we're going to probably be needing to do some EQ here, just thinking to get those sitting right, fitting together, but let's hear what this one's doing. Okay, let's hear this one. So these are essentially playing the same thing, which is nice. A lot of people think it's weird when you got 2 parts playing the same thing, but I'll show you a way that we can kind of make this sound cool. So I'm going to do something I don't usually do, and I'm going to pan these hard left and hard right. And then I'm going to pan this one. Let's see. One of the things I've got to do when you have this many tracks and you're panning things left and right in the stereo field is you want to make sure that you're keeping everything relatively balanced. So I've got these at 51, these at 24, these at 51. So I don't want to put anything over at 51 because that area is pretty well taken care of. But I do have a piano that I can kind of pan off. I'm going to pan this over, let's say, around in the 67 range, something like that. Let's hear what that sounds like with all 3 guitars. So what makes this kind of cool, we added chorus to the acoustic guitar, but since we have 2 guitar parts playing almost essentially the same thing, but they are individual takes, there's going to be microscopic delays in between this electric guitar 1 and electric guitar 2 track. So there's going to be very minuscule differences in between them, and that's going to create their own natural chorus effect. So I don't have to do that. The performer already did that for me. So this track here, I don't know. I haven't really decided if I want to keep it in the center, what I want to do with this, but I try to keep the center open for vocals, but... So it is a really nice wide electric guitar sound. Now I'm going to start working on some EQ to get these to blend together a little bit more. So I'm going to insert one of my favorite EQs right now is this Slate Digital Infinity EQ. I just love the way this thing works. It has infinite bands, so I can create as many as I want. So I'm going to create a high pass filter here, and I'm going to filter off about 100 hertz. Let's see what this sounds like.